Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Jeff, can you please do roll call?
Todd Clemens.
Yes.
Erica Connor.
Here.
Mary DeMore.
Here.
Andy Mankey.
Here.
Art Schneider.
I am here, thank you.
Craig Verts.
Expected.
Jeff Vokel here. Jill Werner.
Here.
Sherry Winchowski.
Expected. This is an open meeting and has been noticed as such. First up, we have citizens' comments.
There are none.
Okay.
If you want to wait for Val to do her presentation when we do the Eagleville Charter discussion.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to consent agenda. We have approval of board minutes of November 26, 2018, and approval of vouchers numbers 120236 to 120492 in the amount of 1.5 million in change, and receipts from November 2018 in funds 10, 21, 27, 41, 50, and 72 totaling 673,000 in change. Do I have any questions or concerns regarding those? All right, hearing none, it's approved. Those are approved by consent. And we also have the German field trip, to Waldese,
Waldsee.
Welcome
Minnesota. Do I have any questions or concerns? All right, hearing none, that's approved by consent. Action items, resignations, retirements, and appointments.
There are none.
All right, and Eagleville Charter.
And Val is here. As you know, this is her first year as principal at Eagleville. She has a presentation on all the great things that are going on there. And then we'll talk about approving the charter.
Hello everyone, my name is Valerie Voss. I am the principal of Eagleville Elementary Charter School this year, and I am humbled by the opportunity to lead the students, staff, and families at Eagleville this year. When I first got the job this summer, I started and looked up the mission of Eagleville and vision of Eagleville, and that is probably in your paperwork as well as on the screen behind you. But the mission is to maximize the academic achievement and personal growth of all students so they very exciting for me and the team to be going to Tier 1 PBIS training to start talking about the positive behavior systems and kind of ramping those up more at Eagleville. We are on year 3 of our science and STEM rotation. So they finished the unit on geology with rocks and minerals, and recently had students in K-6 all got together in their STEM teams and made a replica of a petroglyph. And then they're moving into magnetism and electricity, where students are going to be designing a maglev system. And then the last one of the year is life cycles of animals, and they will be designing a cane-toed trap. So the culminating activities are them getting together as a school-wide STEM teams, K-6, and having a 1 or 2 day STEM activity around their unit of study. Enrollment is exciting and continues to increase at Eagleville. So I have the past year's enrollment as well as the current year, and what we are predicting for next year, and that's based upon current 4K students or families that have a 4-year-old in Infinite Campus. So that was the only way we could pull the potential incoming kindergarten students. I know Ron had a slightly higher number. He included some open enrollments within there, so we know that it could be potentially higher than 15. And then the charter renewal, and I'm not going to click on that, but you probably all have seen it or may have it as part of your packet. I just wanted to highlight, it is primarily the same as it was in the past years, but there's a couple different benchmarks that DPI had put out as mandatory benchmarks within the charter renewal that I just wanted to highlight for you.
Pages 5 through 10 in the packet.
So the first thing is number 3. You may notice that it does not include Spanish, and that's purposeful. Eagleville is very, very fortunate to have a volunteer Spanish teacher for 6 or 7 years. And then this year, last year, at the end of last school year, she had chose to not come back. And this year we had gone through almost exhausting all of our resources to try to find somebody to teach Spanish this year. And so we purposely did not include that in the charter, knowing that even though it may not be included, we can still offer it, but that it might not be something that we look to continue. And the charter board that I've convened is looking at those different things. If you flip the page, probably, and I flipped the page, number 10 was
On page
not
7.
in the original charter, and it says the annual audits of the financial and programmatic operations of the school will be performed by the Waukesha Area School District Business Office and MASD District Auditor. Number 11 was something not in the original charter but was a new benchmark, and the Eagleville Charter School has adopted the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports Framework for student discipline. Number 12, it asks for public school alternatives for students who reside in the school district but who do not wish to attend or are not admitted to Eagleville Charter School, and so those would be the 5 other elementary schools in Waukesha. Number 14 was another new one, that this contract will be executed with the Waukesha Area School District, School Board, Superintendent, Eagleville Principal, and Eagleville Charter Board. The principal will provide an annual report each year to the school board. Number 15, the Eagleville Charter will be funded by the Waukesha Area School District in the same manner as the 5 other elementary schools. And number 16, the term of the contract is 3 years. On probably your next page, my next page, number 18, we had to include evidence that
just had a quick question, just to clarify on number 18. It says evidence that the Charter Governance Board is legally incorporated governing board independent of the authorizer. I assume the school district is the authorizer.
That's correct.
So if I read that correctly, it's saying that the Charter Governance Board operates independently of the school board. Is that correct?
In a manner, in a manner of speaking, yes.
Okay.
So they,
what does that mean as far as our, as a board, ability to supervise Eagleville?
I guess as long as the governing board, the charter board, is following this charter, this contract agreement right here, then they would have the independence. If they go outside that, then the authorizing board, you guys would have a say in that. For our purposes, because Eagleville Charter is an instrumentality of the district, and they are obviously performing very well, I really don't see that as a concern at all.
I'm just
No, I
wanna
think
make
it's a
sure.
great question. So the Department of Public Instruction did add a number of benchmarks, as Val said, so some of these are a little different than what we've seen in the past. But as far as the ones that you might find most interesting would be the Spanish being removed,
Mhm.
and then the enrollment thresholds, number 17. And right now, I believe we may have a conversation next spring or summer about, do we want to limit enrollment at Eagleville? Not so much, do they have, not as much as in the past as when we were having discussions about, do they have enough kids? Now it may be, do they have too many? And I think that's a challenge that Val and the governing board, they'll want to weigh in. What's too many kids? What are too many students at Eagleville? We don't have to answer that tonight, but something to think about down the road.
Are there families that came there from the beginning, because when this was all for the Spanish, that now we're diminishing that there's concern about that, or?
It was a concern of mine starting out this year. I was very worried about what are we gonna do if we don't find a Spanish teacher, and the reality is Spanish teachers are very, very few and far between, especially when we were looking at a half day position, 1 day a week. And so we have been talking at the board level, PTO, or the charter board level, and then the PTO meetings about gathering different feedback from parents and students and the middle school to see whether or not our students, since they've been given Spanish, are they performing at higher levels in the middle school when they are taught Spanish? Is it very important to people or isn't it? And that's what we're looking at to make our decision moving forward. So we certainly haven't made any final decision, but we're having those conversations.
So, but in this, it's saying that you are going to do that.
We had a very difficult time this last year finding a Spanish teacher, and so we didn't want to include it in the charter, knowing, and you may have walked in a little bit, I don't know if you heard me say this.
I didn't, I'm sorry, I
No,
was
that's
tied up at
okay.
work, sorry.
That even if it's not written into the charter, we could always add it as an amendment. I've talked a lot to Sean about that, or even though it's not in the charter, we can still offer it. So just because it's not written into the charter doesn't mean that we can't still offer Spanish.
Oh, right, but my thing was, it was kind of built on that bedrock, and now it's kind of shifting, which the shift was good because it increased your enrollment, because we went to the STEM instead of, or you
Right.
guys went to the STEM instead of the, but I also have some concerns, not concerns. I also think that as a district as a whole, that foreign language should be offered younger, okay? So Eagleville was a place where that was being done, so now if it's not, then it's not done anywhere in the district at the elementary level.
So currently, we are offering the same level of Spanish instruction that we have in the past at Eagleville. It remains to be seen if we can continue that because of the staffing challenge.
Right. But I guess I'm speaking it out loud for the concern,
Sure.
because I
Yeah.
know,
I think we agree.
Erica, you also think, or have expressed that it might be beneficial for our students to have opportunities with foreign language, whether it be in regular classroom time or what that might be, but here we're taking it away versus, so
And
it's
we're
just,
not
it's totally,
necessarily-
and I understand that, but it's just out, so that it's been said out loud.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I guess I
Art?
I'd like to make a motion, we approve the charter.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries.
Thanks, Val.
Thanks, Val.
All right, substitute teacher pay. Are
So
we gonna-
Susan is here to talk about the substitute teacher pay.
So it's no surprise, along with the teacher shortage, that substitute shortage is worse. So we currently use teachers on call, along with most of the districts in this immediate area, especially in the Waukesha area. And so we share the same subs, basically pretty much the same sub pool, although it may vary. Some subs are more loyal to us than other districts and such. We are behind the 8 ball as far as pay rates. So what I'm seeing happening, and this is anecdotal, I can't tell you for sure, but I know TOC has told me this as well, is that teachers take our assignments, and then if another district that pays higher comes in, they cancel and they take that assignment. So we are seeing a much higher cancellation rate and a much lower fill rate than we have in the past. So we're recommending that we increase it to be competitive at 105 and 115. The 115 kicks in if they work more than 20 full school days in a school year. Then it's kind of a loyalty bonus. So that's what we're recommending.
Art?
I would like to make a motion that we go with the recommendation out of the Personnel Committee meeting.
I'll second that. Do we have any further discussion?
My discussion is on, are you also looking at changing the long-term sub amount, or is that, had you not discussed that at all?
We did not discuss that. We basically left it at 150. We do pay higher at some if we have a very hard time filling it, but that hasn't been as much of an issue.
I would just like to, again, just for conversation purposes, because I did call Susan and ask her when it was on the agenda. I didn't realize what it was gonna be about, if it was gonna be daily, or, so when I got the packet, I wasn't. And, I asked her what regular, if at a low base, what teachers would make, how much a day it would be, and she gave me a number. And, we're considerably below that for the long term, and as far as I can see with the situations that I've heard about and seen, they do everything that the other teachers do, that maybe we should consider upping that as well. Not maybe at this minute, but maybe looking into it.
Thought we were about middle of the long term, looking at everything.
Yeah.
Some high some crazy high ones.
Todd, can you talk into your microphone?
You got some high ones as high as 250, but we're kind of in the middle of the whole crowd here. I thought that's why we didn't address it any further. Or I didn't.
Well, as with, not knowing what went on, and then when you find out and you get some information, I felt I needed to share it, because if you have a long-term sub that stays there for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, they are doing report cards, they are doing conferences, they are doing IEPs, and so I think that maybe we should, even if there was a sliding scale or whatever, as far as trainings go, but I think it's considerably lower than what a teacher makes, and they're doing just as much work, so.
They don't have a degree.
And they have to do the lesson plans. They're not like walking into the teacher having prepared for them. The teacher's not. So anyways, that's just something I wanted to bring up.
Jeff?
How do we arrive at 105? The average on the low end is 112. So we're still gonna be
But you're
lower.
also throwing in districts that are kind of out of our area, and districts that historically pay a lot higher. So if we're looking at just the districts that
Area.
we compete with, we're right in the range of where we need to be.
How does this, since we raised it to get competitive, and then we dropped back again. Is this something that on a yearly basis we should probably look at, so that we're not always chasing the
Yes.
rest
I
of the
would
group?
agree that, well, what I would do is bring it to the Personnel Committee anytime that I see it going
Mhm.
out of alignment.
Because my preference would be not to necessarily be the lowest, not the highest, but somewhere
Competitive.
competitive, yeah.
I never recommend being the leader nor the lagging. So if you remain at market and, competitive with the districts around us that we're competing directly with, I mean, we're not gonna compete with subs that primarily sub in Cedarburg. We're competing against East Troy, Kettle Moraine, Waukesha, et cetera. So those are the districts we need to look at. And if we're competitive with them, then I think we're just fine.
All right, I still see it as being lower than even those you said in what I'm reading.
Pardon me?
That's true, and we
It's
did
still
talk,
lower than,
right, we did talk about increasing it higher, but we were unsure. As you know, we are still the lowest revenue district in the area. We're unsure if we could afford it.
how much is it a year? I mean, can we, that would be somehow,
My concern is that we have, had increasing sub-usage, and so both increasing the rate as well as a little increase, I'm not talking about significant, but increased sub-usage, we are going to increase costs. So I'm a little reluctant to go higher than that right now until we see the impact, the financial impact. Sub-usage is hard. I can't give you a concrete number because if a flu epidemic comes through or such, it's gonna affect our usage.
okay.
So to chime in on that there, looking back at our most recent 2 years of usage from Teachers on Call there, if we're gonna increase our rates of pay by about 10.5%, which is going from 95 to 105 and 105 to 115, for regular education, we would, looking at the last 2 years, be in a range of increasing our cost between 31,000 and 48,000. So to go higher than 105 and 115, I would urge a little caution there. As Susan just said, just wait, let's see how this plays out. And let's take this step and then just let the dust fall, see where things end, and then we'll make another decision later.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries. All right, school safety plans.
So if we take a look at my memo on page 14. So we need to be in compliance because we're participants in the school safety grant process. We have to be in compliance with Wisconsin Act 143. And so there are certain requirements that we must do. One of the requirements was due last, I think, July 1, and Andy, I had to submit all the plans, or I'm sorry, the maps and the blueprints of our schools to the Department of Justice. And now, at the end of this calendar year, we need to submit our safety plans, our school safety plans. I put one example in your packet, and then we mailed the rest to you today. And then we also have to submit the principal's most recent summary of their school violence drill. So all of our schools did a school violence drill this past fall. Then the principals are required to summarize that, and we send that to the Department of Justice also. So we need the board to recommend, or to approve that we're in compliance. And so I'm here to tell you that we are in compliance. All of our schools have safety plans and drills, and the principals have written their summaries. We also sent those summaries to you in an email today.
I make a motion to approve.
Us,
Okay, who wants the second?
Jill's got.
Jill, okay. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. All right. 1920 calendar.
So that's me again. And I have to find the page, sorry.
We need to be in executive.
46 and 47. So we've taken a look at the calendar a couple of times, two different meetings, and I know that some of you had expressed concern about the last day of school being a little later next year, and on our calendar, our proposed calendar, we're ending on Wednesday, June 10th. And so I just put in some other districts in Waukesha County when they're ending next year. Elmbrook, Kettle Moraine, Muskego, Norway, New Berlin, Pewaukee, Waukesha. You can see they're all June 9, 11, or 12. Then we did make one change. We took the in-service day that had been scheduled for February 10th and put that on September 30. And I explained that in my memo, and I'm hoping that we can move forward with this proposed calendar tonight.
I make a motion that you to accept the calendar as it's set up.
Second.
I'm just gonna say I am not voting for it because we made a promise to the parents not to have as many days off during the school year, and that's why we went to Wednesdays. And now we're adding school days along with that, going back on our promise. Any other discussion?
While I agree with your statement, I am going to vote for it because I feel like if we are throwing a ton of new curriculum stuff at our teachers and they're asking for a little bit more time, I say we give them a shot. I do hope that we get feedback at the end of next school year to see how it went. I don't necessarily feel like this is setting a precedent for the rest of our future, but I think in this moment in time, we have to make the decision that's best for this moment in time.
Right, any other discussion?
I would have to agree with Mary because I had kids in the district when we put the Wednesdays in there, and extending it into the middle of June is a big ask for parents, and I think it's a big ask for students. And the block schedule I know is unique, and it's something that the students, everybody that I've talked to, have said they like it and they're adjusting well. But to extend the calendar out further into June, I'm not in support of it.
Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no?
Aye.
No. All right, motion carries. Next up, student learning updates, graduation rates.
Someone had a question, and I can't recall who had a question. Maybe it was even at the learning committee. Erica, you had a question about graduation rates and report cards?
It came
So-
up at the last meeting.
Okay, and so Nick could not attend tonight. His wife has their holiday concert at Jefferson, so he's there supporting them. And so he put this memo together, and you can see our 4-year graduation rate, our 6-year graduation rate. But I'm not quite sure if that's answering your question, Erica, so maybe I have to.
I'll talk to him further. It doesn't really answer my question. I think he attempted on that last paragraph. Since our graduation rates are so high, the state substitutes the highest rate of change in the state for our score. And I guess I don't really have my mind wrapped around that, but I will talk to him about that.
I think it has something to do with the difference between the non-traditional students, the 6-year students and the 4-year students. I don't get it either.
No, that's why there's a different graduation rate, the difference between the 4-year rate and the 6-year rate. Why the 4-year rate is 96.7. So some of our students, special needs students who are allowed to attend after they're 18, don't graduate with their cohort. They graduate a year or 2 later, and so that increases the graduation rate for the 6-year cohort as opposed to the 4-year.
Right, but I think that's where they're
So-
pulling this number out, this .16. It's because of that, because to get it right, they want us to have improvement between something, and we can't. It's kind of like.
And that, I get the 4-year and the 6-year. Maybe it's based on the data we've been given from the state. We have not been able to determine which school's rate we've been given.
That's true.
And
I
that
know
is
Nick
my
and Ben
question.
do not, or at least not when I last spoke to them about it, they're not sure which school district's rate that is. But obviously, our graduation rate is very strong.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that we have a concern about graduation rates. We do a very good job with your support of having a number of alternative education programs for our students that might be at risk of not graduating, whether it be the SOAR program, which we just added, or the GPS, the Generac program that we've been working with them for many years. So we have a variety of different programs that help students graduate, those that aren't going to fit in the traditional high school program. So we have very strong graduation rates, but as far as the dynamics of that report card
Yeah.
score there, we'll bring Nick and Ben back on that one. Next time they're here, they can explain that a little better.
Anybody else with any questions? All right. Finance and Facilities, the 10-year capital plan.
So Andy Wagner's here, and he is going to do the presentation on the 10-year capital plan. And then this would be a good time for if you have questions about the issue yesterday with the high school. We can talk about that too.
I heard you guys just cleaned some carpets.
We did. When we say we, I don't mean me, but yeah, Andy did.
Good evening. So before you in your packet between pages 51 and 53 is the 10-year plan that we use for capital. It's the same plan that's been presented in the past, and we continue to fine tune it as we go throughout the year. Looking at what needs to be done and what could be done and what can possibly be put towards the future to offset some things. Some of those things that could be offset is maybe like an HVAC unit that we feel is coming to life in 35 years but might make it 40 and we might extend it out. So in your packet you had the items that we're proposing, and for this next year our main goals are for like Clarendon and Eagleville to get some new carpeting and new paint in those schools. They're coming to their life expectancies and showing well. And then just a few other things with new roof at Parkview. We've had a considerable amount of leaks there in the last year in some of these sections, so it's very prudent to get that taken care of for what we've endured there. In the funding of this, that's coming out of funds 41 and 46, and that was stated in there as well as in Fund 41. We have roughly $6 million as of July and $1.4 million in 46. So if we continue to offset our fund balance by about $200,000 a year like we are currently, we'll be able to maintain what we have projected for the 10 years. And our net present value currently for that 10 years is about 12.3, and if you carry that out over the 10 years of the projects that we have presented, it's about 13.3, is about an extra million. So, do you have any questions of the report itself?
I have a question on the high school flooring.
Yeah.
It's just a chunk of change and so I was wondering which flooring it was.
So part of that is that there was flooring for the South Gym presented. It was going to have to be replaced, and so some of this is coming from referendum funds, but it was part of the project or part of the forecast.
So not all of this is coming out of, well.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So quick question. Could you explain how you arrive at your numbers when you are putting together this plan? Because
So-
you're obviously not going out to bid. We're not at
we're
that
not
point.
going out to
So
bid. So
how
like
do you
when,
get there?
so when you
Point of
would,
accuracy is my
so
concern.
the process is that when something is replaced, we have the replacement cost at that point. We forecast it out 30 years. In that, we do a 2% increase per year, and so over the 30 years, that increase would come to a set dollar with that 2% increase each year, and that's how we come to the dollar. That's just giving us a budget number. That's not necessarily that it's going to be $300,000. We might get someone to bid it for $250,000 on set item. So it's to give us a number to placehold some money.
Any other questions?
So just so you know, as our Fund 46 is one of our, all funds in the 40s are funds that are dedicated for building purposes. In October of 2019, that money will become available to us, but only on projects that are approved of in this plan. So that's the reason why Andy's bringing this to you tonight, so when that money becomes available, we do this presentation of getting the 10-year capital plan approved once a year about this time, give or take a few months. So when we get to October of next year, we'll have this in line to begin attacking projects that we have on here.
Yep.
And I think, which we talk about the capital improvement plans and the Fund 46, the different funds we have. I know this might answer Erica's question when we had that levy increase, when we went a little higher the last time. Obviously, once we have the excess funds, maybe it might be prudent to, depending on when we know what those funds are, to kind of
questions about the high school incident?
Oh.
What is the high school?
So we sent an email today.
Just roughly yesterday afternoon, about 1:30, I received a phone call from Julie Hanisch that a sprinkler had let loose in the foyer of the PAC. I made a very quick ride over to the high school to help out getting the riser turned off. It was set off due to frozen pipe. It was on the outside wall of the front of the school, and after much investigation last night, we found that I believe in design. It was in a closed space where inside air was not getting to the pipe, which when I put a heat gun on it, I had 33 degrees, and then we found some metal within that space was 24 degrees. So that area froze. We since opened up the area. We have air getting to it. They're redesigning vents to get into that area so that it will be fixed for the future. We reestablished the water supply to both sections of sprinkler system that we shut off. There was no interruption to the play yesterday, only a 10-minute delay. Awesome staff. I had people come in and helped us get cleaned up yesterday. I did have a restoration company come, which I canceled in the end because of such a great job that your employees have done for you in saving what we did. I had Ryan Schmidt from CG Schmidt was there yesterday. He assessed it again today. We are replacing, well, we're pulling up all the carpet tomorrow morning, drying out the floor where we had a rubber backing on the carpet, and we will be re-gluing down the carpet on sections that are good. Anything that is bad, such as it was stained by the rusty water, that'll be replaced, and everything should be back together by tomorrow night. They're very apologetic for what had happened, and I have no other answers other than that is what had happened.
And they're paying for it?
That's what I was gonna
They're
ask.
paying for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there any other areas that would be similar that just didn't
Well,
happen?
I did ask Ryan to assess those other possible areas. My main concern is any area that we had the new metal facade put on the building as possibly having that problem. Our existing parts where we have the EFIS on the building, I don't believe we're gonna have a problem. We haven't had in 30-some years, right? 40-some years. So, we did check other areas. We are addressing the main entrance to the west gym just in case, but we don't find any evidence of any problem there. We're also addressing entrance 4 where the health room is. That was existing, however, they took a heating unit out of the vestibule there, and that's being replaced. So we're confirming that there's no problems there as well. So I believe we have it addressed.
Good. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Yep.
Okay. OPEB update?
Sure, so on page 54, tonight's OPEB discussion is going to have just a couple parts to it. The first part is our quarterly update, so the first quarter ended September 30, and we got our results back. I'm bringing that to you there on page 54. Again, just to remind the board, we have our Fund 73 OPEB funds separated into two different accounts. One is with Citizens Bank. We call that our local trust. We have $5.6 million in there, and that earned a 2.04% rate of return in the first quarter. The other account is known as the Wisconsin OPEB Trust Fund. We have that in cooperation with CISA 6, BMO Harris, and Morgan Stanley. As of September 30, that account had $2.2 million, and that earned a 2.43% rate of return. So all told, we have $7.8 million for our OPEB liabilities as of September 30. To give the board a quick update here, I will provide our investment policy. We adopted our investment policy just before I began here in mid-2015. So I'll bring that investment policy back in January, and we'll review hopefully our actuarial analysis in February and have our results then, so we can look at the totality of the money, how it's performing, what goals we need to hit with our investments, and then we'll make some, consider a new investment strategy at that time if we need to. So that's the outlook there. Okay?
Next question. Okay.
All right, then, the second part is on page 57. CISA 6, we're talking about the Wisconsin OPEB trust fund that we have with CISA 6. BMO Harris is the trustee, and Morgan Stanley / Greystone Consulting are the investment managers of the money. There's about 50 school districts that participate in this arrangement, and there's a board of business managers. I'm not a part of that. There's 5 of the 50 school districts have business managers that form a board. They ensure that everything is arranged, organized, being executed as it was designed. There's a lawyer that works on our behalf to review the legal language, and she did review the original resolution and noted that there was a few areas that needed some improvement to get stronger safeguards for our school district here. So in a nutshell, that's what this is all about here. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them here. I think all the information is in front of you, but what we're really looking to do is to approve the adopting resolution. That's on page 59, 60, and 61. Those things right there, that adopting resolution will ultimately give us a new and revised trust agreement. That trust agreement is just giving us stronger protections in a legal sense. It will also adopt a single advisory contract, which ultimately appoints BMO Harris as the trustee. They hold the money. They make sure that money comes in and out only according to law, or is what's limited by law. We couldn't take that money to make payroll here, for example. That money's in a trust. It needs to stay aimed and invested for the purposes of when we establish that trust, which is employee benefits. So BMO Harris would be appointed as the trustee, and then the investment manager, Morgan Stanley / Greystone Consulting, would be reappointed as well. So currently, behind the scenes, is that there's an RFP that was issued on our behalf through CISA 6 that says what other investment managers are out there, what's your fee, how good are you, and that's taking place again behind the scenes there. But the here and the now is we're going to go ahead and appoint, with your permission, we should take action and adopt the new adopting resolution at the next meeting if you're comfortable with that, for stronger protections, and we'll continue to work to make sure everything's managed as needed. Is there any questions about any of that stuff there?
I make a motion that we accept
Oh, we're not.
Tom's
So,
changes.
yeah, we'll do that
We're
the
not
next
doing
meeting.
that at the next- We'll do that at the next meeting.
Sure.
So if you have any questions for Tom before the next meeting, get those to him.
Sure. And that's
Okay.
all.
All right, enrollment projections?
You wanna wait on that? Okay. 8 minutes. All right, I'll give everybody a. All right, as we kick off our budget building process here for the 1920 school year, step 1 is to project our enrollment here. So I'll walk everybody through here very quickly what we're going to do here, or what I propose, and if there's any questions, please let me know. Taking a quick look back at our actual enrollment in 5K through 12, you can see that we've dipped down to a low point in 2014-15, and then coming up from that low point the last 4 years, we have increased enrollment. We saw exceptional growth in the 18-19 school year, and I'll talk about that just for a little bit, but there's elements in growth that I was not able to predict. There's growth that we haven't seen like this in the last 11, 12 years, which is a great sign for the district, but it's very hard to predict that when you use history as your indicator, because nothing in our recent history would have suggested that that amount of growth was going to happen. So overall, for our enrollment projections, and again, we're talking about simply building the budget. How much money do we want to work with when we build our initial budget? And the more assumed enrollment growth we have, the bigger the budget we think we're going to have. And I like to be conservative in how much money we have to work with. So with that being said, for now, I just recommend that we have a 0 growth assumption. There's a lot of reasons to believe that growth is going to occur throughout the district. There's a lot of development that's in the works here in the village. I have to communicate a little bit more with the village planners over in Big Bend, Town of McGuanago. I speak a lot with Bruce Kanieski here in the village of McGuanago, but I have some work to do to talk with others. But there's a lot of reasons to think that enrollment's going to continue to grow here in McGuanago. Taking a look at what we have for our actual head count, this is how we project our enrollment. This is 10 years worth of data that we have on the screen here. The orange, green, and yellow numbers there represent a cohort of students that's traveling through time from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, so on and so forth. So what we do with those numbers is we study those numbers, and this is the same data just represented in terms of growth, either growth in a positive percentage or growth in a negative percentage there. So we can take a look at how are these classes growing from year to year. When we take a look at that, then we just look at one particular column. So in yellow there I have what our last 10 years of third graders growing into the fourth grade and what rate of change did they experience. In the blue column there I have ninth graders going into the 10th grade, and we'll look at 10 years worth of data to say what does the typical ninth grade going into 10th grade look like. And from there we make some, we take a look at various sets of data. We can look at the last 5 years and take an average of those years. We can take a look at the last 2 years and take an average. We could simply look at the last year and project that out into the future. We could put 60% of the weight onto the most recent year and 40% of the weight onto the blue years, the prior 4 years. So there's a lot of different ways that we could take a look at how our data is gonna grow here. If we were gonna assume that this school year coming up, the 1920 school year, is gonna grow just like this last year did, we would grow by 76 students. And we had the most explosive growth coming into 18-19. So you can see that this would project a lot of growth. Okay, I don't know if we're gonna have back-to-back years like that. We very well might, I'm not sure. Okay, there's more analysis that's needed. If we looked at the blended method where we use 60% of last year's rate of growth and 40% of the prior 4 years, we would add 29 students over the current level. I have my own selection method where I look at every single grade and say this is what I think is gonna happen within this grade, and this gives us a plus 18 value. If we take a look at our average of the last 2 years, we would grow by 10. Average of the last 5 years, we would shrink by 17. And if we look at the average of the last 5 years, subtracting the minimum and maximum values, we would shrink by 22. So there's a wide range of values you can see in all those colored graphs. So we could land anywhere within those. We could fall below all that. We could go even higher than all that. But we're using history as our indicator right now to kind of make our best guess as to where do we think this thing's gonna go. Okay? So if we just use I wouldn't say I have a conservative guess, but it's not aggressive by any stretch. It's a moderate guess as to what I think enrollment's gonna do, and I think it's fair to think that we're gonna be somewhat close to that. If we start with our 4,783 5K through 12th graders that we currently have, we'll subtract off this year's seniors. That'll leave us in June when they graduate. We'll add the returning kindergarten through 11th graders who will come back to us next year. They're gonna bring 147 friends with them, okay? And with that, we'll add in the next wave of 5K students. Now, the next wave of 5K students is the hardest to predict. We don't know how many there are. We have a 4K community partner program, but not every student participates in that that's eligible or lives in the district here. So that's the toughest number to guess right there. And altogether, that would give us 4,801 students, which is growth of about 18 students from where we are right now. So even with a reasonable guess, I think that we are gonna grow. But again, in terms of setting how much money are we going to begin planning for, I'd rather start conservative rather than start aggressive. So does Tom know what he's doing? Depends on who you're asking. Looking back at the last 3 years, we are off by 27 and 25 students in 16-17 and 17-18. But this past year for 5K through 12th grade, we were off by 140. We saw growth like we've never seen before. So looking at history to be our indicator, history wasn't gonna give us the answers. There's other things that we need to look for, such as housing turnover. I can't capture that within what we're doing. How many folks might be selling their houses because they're gonna move into a condo or they're gonna downsize and a new family comes in. My analysis doesn't capture that, but there are opportunities to have an analysis done, but I wouldn't be able to do that for us. When I looked at why we were off by 140, looking at each of our grades, in the left column, I have what I thought the grade was gonna be, and then the 18-19 actual values. The biggest class I was off by was the kindergartners. I thought we were gonna have 273 kindergarten students, and we wound up with 319. That's an awesome thing when your 5K students are growing like that, because that's your building block for the entire basis of our school district as we move forward, and the entire basis for our funding as well. At the high school levels in 9th grade through 12th grade, we have 52 more students than we thought. I guess I don't know what the reason for that is, but perhaps it might be the renovation that we did at the high school that's bringing in more students. Okay, so altogether, those are good things there. So as I move forward here to start building the 1920 budget, I recommend that we begin to use a budget that assumes zero growth, and we just build it conservatively from a financial standpoint with no change in resident enrollment or no change in open enroll in or out. And I think that's safe, and there's no need to overestimate how much money we'll have at this time. We can make adjustments later, June, July, when we see what actual enrollment is looking like, and we can make changes at that time. Okay? And I'm also going to recommend that I'll take a look at using the Applied Population Lab at UW-Madison. They're the folks who work on behalf of school districts that can look at some of those things that I can't capture that I mentioned before about housing turnover and some of those other characteristics that would affect why enrollment would go up or down as it did. And they'll work with we have multiple municipalities that we need to work with, and they could attack and do those things through the connections and relationships that they have. Just a few other observations here that I'll share real quick. This is looking at the rate of growth for all of our grades over this 10-year time period here. Anything in red shows a decline in enrollment. Over the last 6 years or so, you can see that from the kindergarten all the way up into the 9th grade, we have not experienced. So basically everything in the lower left side, even, there's nothing red there. We grow every year from kindergarten to first, from first to second, from second to third. We do a great job over the last 6 or 7 years there. 9th grade to 10th grade and 10th grade to 11, we have a slight decrease of students there. It's not a lot, but it's there. But we seem to grow quickly, again, going from the 11th to the 12th grade. Taking a look at Waukesha County birth rates, the 2019, next year's kindergartners are going to come to us as kids born in 2014. So when we guess why are we projecting a small number of 5K students, it's because birth rates are low. We typically get 8% of all county births here in McGuanago as our students in 5K. But looking back in time, 5 years ago, there weren't that many babies being born here in the county. It's starting to tick up here as time moves on, but that's the low water mark right there. Looking at 5K enrollment here, we've had 319 5K students each of the last 2 years, which we're trending up, which is great. Taking a look at, most importantly, how many of those are resident students. We have trended up, slight decrease here in the past year, but all in all, I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. So that's the state of the union, more or less, in enrollment and projections. I'd like to ask Art right now if he has any comments that he'd like to share.
No, you're just.
Okay. So, is there any questions I can answer from anybody else?
Is there a cost associated to this Applied Population Lab?
Yeah, I can share that with you. I have a printout right here if you'd like to take a look at that. I hosted Waukesha County business managers here last week or the week before for the second time. We get together and roundtable it, share ideas, share concerns. I asked them, what do you typically do? And every third year, they typically work with Applied Populations Lab to give an outside analysis as to what's going on and some other factors to consider here.
How necessary do you view that?
In terms of building the budget, we have adequate fund balance. I don't want to end a school year with an extra $1 million added to fund balance. It takes us above our norm of 25% on the high end. And when we have a lot of fund balance that we end up with, and I have to look at principals and give them reasons why I said we don't have the money for it, then I have to start to search what are those reasons for. Being the lowest funded school district in Waukesha County, knowing that we have enough money set aside for our debt obligations, for our buildings, with the money that we get, I want to use that to empower the teachers and the principals to spend it on the kids in the classroom, not to build it in fund balance. I think that at some point in time, there was good reason to build fund balance. But once you hit your fund balance marks, I think you want to begin to plan very intentionally, very strategically. That's a tough thing to do because just as we talked about earlier with the teachers on call thing, a flu epidemic occurs and all of a sudden your teachers on call costs go way up or way down. There's a lot of different things that could drive the budget up or down, but I try to build it as intentional as possible so we can get it where it needs to be spent, and that's to the benefit of the kids. So sometimes I think that there might be, if there wasn't any reason for this, I'd say let's not do it. I do think that there is some merit here because it can help us understand how some variables that we're not seeing we're capable of seeing with the information we have in front of us.
Have you ever used it before?
This will be a first for me.
So it would, we wouldn't know till we tried it once.
But you're going to come to us when you find out what it's going to run and
Sure.
look for that.
I can share you the.
I would like to know that.
Sure,
before.
absolutely.
I think the board would like to.
Not a problem.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Buildings and grounds staffing, we open?
So, are we on the personnel committee?
Yeah.
No? Okay, so I think, I don't, unless someone has a question, I think we covered all of those items in, the personnel. A couple of them we'll talk about in executive session
Executive
tonight.
session,
Yep.
that's what I was asking you. Okay. All right, let's go to unfinished business, superintendent's report.
Yeah, just remember that this is our last meeting for December, and then in January, we meet on January 14 and 28. And on the 14th, one of the things that we'll have to do is go through the WASB proposed resolutions and give our marching orders for Erica. That's all I have.
All right, correspondence legislation.
Just there is one piece of correspondence. You saw that the girls' golf team was, received the sportsmanship award for the Classic 8.
Good for them.
All right, board member questions? All right, I'll make the motion to move into executive session.
Second.
Jerry, can you do roll call?